not to absolutely fall in love with the sound of a supercharger. What's going on, everybody? It's Charles, and this is our 2010 Audi S4 that we used in our drag race competition against Gears and Gasoline. So I got this 2010 S4 for $1,500. That's right, $1,500. Now I know what you're thinking, Charles. There is no way possible in real life this is a $1,500 car. And what I'll say is, like, you're probably right. This should never be a $1,500 car. What I want to do in this video is show you all the things that are wrong with this S4, as well as give you guys some pointers on what to look at if you're looking at a used S4. Also, big thanks to WD-40 brand for partnering with us on this video. Since I am going to be fixing this S4 at some point, I'm going to be pre-treating with penetrant. That'll hopefully make the suspension coming apart a little easier. But as I was doing that, it dawned on me that I put this lift in about a year ago, and it's time for some maintenance. What I used to lubricate the lift is WD-40 brand Specialist Gel Lube. It's no drip, so when I spray it on, it doesn't all just like ooze down to the bottom of the lift and out onto the floor. This is the perfect stuff to use when you're lubricating vertical surfaces. As always, I'll put links down in the description. When these S4s were new, they ranged in price from $47,000 or so all the way up to about $65,000 for the fully decked out version. I don't know exactly where this one fell in that price point, but it's probably on the higher end. And this is why when you hear someone paid $1,500 for one, all the red flags go up and it sounds like something that it's not possible. And I agree, it really does feel that way. This is not a deal that comes out all the time. On the average day, you're probably not gonna jump on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace and find a $1,500 S4, but deals like this actually do come up. So the story as I can best figure is we're on about 3 or 4 owners on this car. The car has 213,000 miles on it, and one really common thing on these older S4s is DSG issues. There's multiple TSBs, multiple repairs, and guess what? This one has DSG issues. There was a couple of faults stored in the TCM that pointed to a wiring harness that does typically go bad inside the mechatronics unit, as well as some clutch sadness faults. I don't think that's actually what the fault said, but that's pretty much what it meant. That alone is not a super cheap repair. You're probably looking at $1,000, $1,300 for that wiring harness. Not crazy money in the scope of how much this car costs new, but also not pocket change. Now, here's where things most likely went sideways. Rather than having the car fixed and the warning lights taken care of in the dash, the car got driven and driven and driven up until the point where the car barely drove.
Ooh.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I don't think it requires going very far.
So now we're faced with a car that barely gets out of its way. Like, you wouldn't want to drive to the store in it because when you punch the gas, it may not actually go. This leads a customer to make a decision. Do they want to put a $1,500-something wiring harness, including labor in it? Do they want to try and get it repaired with the DSG clutch packs? Or what most shops are going to do with this high mile of a car is they're going to quote either a new, a remanufactured, or a used transmission. While there may be better deals to be had out there, the cheapest complete transmission I could find for this car is about $3,100. Now that $3,100 doesn't include tax, and it for sure does not include labor. Now the reason a shop's probably not going to make one of these individual repairs is it's a complete gamble. If you put the harness in and it doesn't fix it, you've just charged a customer $1,500 and their car's no better off. If you do a clutch pack and you charge them, I don't know what it would cost, maybe $3,000, and it's not right, obviously we're going to have a problem. So what it seemed like is the owner of this vehicle actually just wanted to get out of the car and not make any repairs. The transmission issues were probably the final nail in the coffin for our poor S4. That is not all that's wrong with this car, so let's take a look around and see what else we can find. All right, we're gonna start under the hood, but real quick before we get there, you'll notice this car is actually pretty beat up. The bumper's all busted right here, right here, right here, right here. It's also hanging off a little bit, but this one, that one's my fault. It needs a passenger side front headlight, which as you can see, it's been replaced once already. Moving on to under the hood, we have oil leaks up on top. So it looks like our valve cover gaskets are both leaking, both on the passenger side bank and on the driver's side bank. You can also see some oil leaking from the vacuum pump. So that's another piece of the puzzle that would need to be addressed. Woo. There's also a bit of intermittent chain tensioner rattle on cold start. You'll notice it has this cool race car guy intake on it. This is actually there because the factory intake was broken, including this little vacuum fitting right here that was broken as well. Not like major issues, but something that if you brought it to a shop and they were looking the car over, they would note for you. While our transmission was far and away the most expensive part of the sadness on our S4, the next biggest problem this car had is a worn out suspension. This is actually super common on pretty much every B8, 7, 6, all the way back to B5. Basically the same thing that the old Passats like my wagon had. So usually one of two things happens with these control arms. Most commonly what happens is the bushing wears out or completely splits like in our case. The other thing that can happen is the boots for the ball joints break, allowing dirt and moisture in and ruining the ball joint. This one looks like the ball joints are okay, but those bushings are definitely a problem. As we move underneath, we're gonna find kind of more of the same when it comes to the suspension. The majority of the bushings are either split or worn out. We also at the front can see some remnants of our oil leak on the driver's side. Looks like we got a little bit of fluid leaking from our engine mounts, and it might shock you to learn, but as we move to the back, more of the same. Odds are the majority of this entire suspension is probably original, which means that when we fix it, we're probably gonna do springs, shock absorbers, and bushings all around. There's also some other exterior cosmetic things that are not a huge deal, but are definitely worth noting. These are 19-inch wheels, and I gotta say, I really dig these wheels. This one, however, had an owner that did a lot of drive-by feel, and you can see just how road rashed this one is. This one is. This left rear one even has curb rash on the inside of the wheel. We have a handful of dings and dents. We have a crushed rocker on the driver's front. Odds are from somebody not lifting the car properly. We also have this overspray or graffiti. That doesn't impact the drivability of the car really in any way, but it does take away from the overall value. On the interior side, we have a sagging headliner, and a lot of the really nice things in the car that set the S4 apart from other even Audis are not in great shape. A lot of this carbon fiber trim on the door panels is either cracked or split. Door panel itself on the driver's side is worn out right where it looks like you might put your elbow.
Before we get into what some of these repairs cost, let's look at what this car is worth. We're gonna be using KBB, which I don't think is the most accurate thing in the world, but it's gonna be consistent for what we're doing here. So we have a 2010 Audi S4. So let's start with trade-in value. We'll also look at private party value. In good condition, which they say around 54% of cars are going to be at this age and mileage, only looking at 2,900 to 5,500 trade-in. We drop it down to fair, we drop to 1,900 to 4,300, and really, this car is probably going to fall more in the poor category based on the fact that it barely moves, which they don't even assign a value to. So when we look at a car in fair condition, 18% of all cars we value, some mechanical repairs, bodywork, engine leaks, substantial wear on the interior, wheels bent or warped. We got some pretty significant issues on the wheels. Now, if the car didn't have the transmission issues, we'd probably fall somewhere between fair and good condition. But since we have those transmission issues, I mean, we really honestly are going to be putting it at poor. Let's move back to good condition and switch over to private party, which will probably be a more realistic price of what we would buy it for in the open market. In good condition, anywhere from $5,000 to $8,500. We drop down to fair, $4,000 to $7,000, keeping in mind that to fall in fair condition, we can't have those transmission issues that we have. Just for the sake of fun, let's change it to 113,000 miles and see how that impacts our value. So this value, when we move it to 100,000 miles or 113, is putting the value of the car more where it feels like it should be, in that $10,000 to $13,000 price point in good condition private party. Trade-in value is always going to be lower, $8,000 to $10,000. So if we put the car in fair condition, not even including the transmission issues, we're only looking at about maybe a $4,000 to $6,000 car. Okay, now here's where the fun and kind of scary part comes in. Let's see what all these repairs are gonna end up costing if we paid a shop to do it.
So I had my buddy throw together a quote, dealership prices, let's go, this is what it's gonna cost. To replace those suspension bushings, $1,791, parts and labor. Engine mounts, if we did both of them, we're looking at $1,083.21. Valve cover gaskets, $476. That's actually not too bad for valve cover gaskets. To replace the cam chain tensioners, $3,735. When we look at the passenger side headlight, you might think, Charles, that doesn't need to be replaced, but actually, in the state we live in, this would fail state inspection for a brand new headlight. Oof. $1,471.19. We could save a bunch of money here, drop that down to $531 if we used a used headlight. The headliner getting replaced, which we don't have to have, mostly cosmetic, going to be $2,278 for a new one. You could probably drop a couple $100 off if we just had that one recovered, or we could cut it all together. Here's where it gets expensive. The mechatronic unit wiring harness that I did, parts and labor, you're looking at about $1,355. And remember, that didn't completely fix our transmission issues. Now, I've had them quote replacing the entire transmission. I don't think anyone in their right mind really would replace with a new or reman unit from Audi on this car. But if you did that, you're looking at $14,000 parts and labor, actually a little bit more than that, but I rounded down because it felt like the right thing to do. If you went with the used transmission that I found at $3,100, you're looking right about $5,300 just to replace the transmission. If you tried to get away from doing the transmission as a whole and just did the clutch pack, same repair Paul and I did together, looking right about $3,000. If you got new clutch packs, boy, are those guys expensive, $4,400 to get that done. As you can, like, if you're doing the math in your head right now, you're like, this car's totaled 4 times over. We start to see why someone sees bills like this and they go, I just want to get rid of it. Not including replacing with a new transmission, it's over $20,000 worth of work. Now I know what you're saying, Charles, those are dealership prices. Get that out of here. Nobody's going to take a car like this to the dealership. Maybe not. Even if we cut that price in half, which is incredibly optimistic, taking it to an independent shop, getting it 50% less than the dealership, we're still talking over $10,000. We're spending 10 grand on a car that's only gonna really be in about $8,000 to $10,000 price range. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. $1,500 was really about what the car was worth at the time. And there's one final thing you're thinking, Charles, I know you could part it out for more money than $1,500, and you're 100% right. And that is how I stumbled into a $1,500 S4. Right now I'm about $3,100 into this car. I'm actually gonna keep this car around a little while for a couple of reasons. One, it's a platform I'm not super familiar with, so it's a great learning experience. Two, I really want to make it a rally cross car, even though the B8 platform is probably not the best one out there for it. Still going to be a boatload of fun. With that, I am out. Hey, if you haven't seen that drag race series, I highly recommend you check it out. You get to see Paul and I have a good time and blow up a GLI with nitrous. With that, I'm out. Have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you guys again next time. Bye-bye.